Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, where we bring awareness of sustainable health in the business hustle space. The Natural Health Podcast is perfect for the high-performing, business-minded individuals who want to work with their biochemistry to achieve success and optimal health. It's Friday, which means it's time for friends sharing facts about health, business, and overall success. In today's episode, we talk to Spencer Feldman. Spencer Feldman is an Oregon native who grew up in New York and lived there for most of his life before finding contentment in the Pacific Northwest. His background is holistic health and chelating therapy, and passion for detoxification allows Spencer to do what he loves every day, which is making products that allow real detox to happen. Being the longest running suppository company in the United States, Spencer has shared his passion for health over 20 years with products that represent true craftsmanship and commitment to quality. Spencer is the founder of Remedylink, where for the last 20 years, he has spent time formulating and manufacturing detoxification products for doctors and their patients. His company specializes in helping support your body's natural response to heavy metal toxins. I'm so excited to have Spencer here. A little bit about Spencer is that he now lives with his partner completely off-grid on his 100-acre farm, where he spends most of his time with his orchids and gardening, while also continuing to design amazing products for people like yourselves. Welcome to the Natural Health Podcast, Spencer.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mahela.
You're most welcome. So tell me, have you been gardening lately? What's been happening on this 100-acre farm?
Well, let's see. We're burning a lot of brush now that it's the wet season. So because we have a lot of wildfires out here, and you want to get all the brush up to about 8 feet up the tree so that you don't get the trees lit up from some grass fires. So that's a big part of it. There's also putting in new trees. So we're going to put in some pecans and some chestnuts and maybe some more asparagus.
How exciting.
In the spring. Yeah, it's always a design in progress. So it's always a work in progress.
I love it. You get to design it yourself.
Yeah, and you'll probably hear some of our guinea hens. That's our natural, organic way of going after the chick population out here.
Nice. That's amazing. So how long have you been completely off the grid?
I guess it's been about 9 years now. And, it's rewarding to be self-sufficient, to generate your own power and, access your own water and create your own plumbing and do it all yourself. It's a lot of work, but I couldn't think of living any other way.
Yeah, it's becoming a new thing, especially here in Australia. A lot of individuals are talking about going off grid. And I mean, look, you're a veteran already for 9 years.
If you like, we could certainly do a whole talk just on all the lessons learned about, the things that you have to do for yourself. When you live in a city, you flush a toilet, your wastes are taken away. You dial a phone number, fresh food is delivered to you. You flip on a switch, there's all the power you could ever want. Heat, cold, everything, phone, internet, it's all provided. And when and trash is taken away. When you have to do it all yourself, there's a learning process.
Yeah, that would be absolutely amazing to get you back on here and talk about that. I'm pretty sure a lot of the audience would be interested about these lessons that you've learned and some advice that you could offer. But before we get into today's topic, which I'm so excited about, talking all things detoxifications and metals, so many around us at the moment, we wanted to know a little bit more about Spencer. Who is Spencer? What has happened in Spencer's life to get you to where you are now and to open Remedylink?
Well, I wanted to be an emergency room surgeon. And when I was in college, there was someone I think had measles. And so they closed down the college and they said, if you want to come back to college, you have to take a measles shot. And I didn't know any better, so I lined up. And after the measles shot, and I didn't realize it was related, I was eating soup for lunch or dinner. And my hands shook so badly that the soup would shake out of the spoon before I could eat it. And so I went to a doctor and I said, hey, what's going on with my hands? I'm, 19 years old and I've got the hands of someone with, who's got some kind of nerve damage. And he said, well, here's a drug for you. I'm like, okay, but why do I have it? Right? Explain to me, the reason behind how someone as young as myself got this. And he, wouldn't or couldn't or didn't, and just offered me a drug, and that wasn't working for me. Well, okay. So now I'm obviously not going to be a surgeon. You can't hold us. If you can't drink soup, you're not going to manage a scalpel. But I still liked medicine. So I went into alternative medicine. And years later, I finally figured out I had probably gotten a bad reaction from the vaccine, the measles vaccine. Maybe I'd gotten a shot from the very bottom of the vial where there was a lot of mercury and it damaged my nerves. I don't know exactly the process by which it happened, but the timing was right there. And so, I knew that something was off, and I thought it might be some kind of toxin that I might have been exposed to. And so over the course of, a couple of years, I started studying a lot of German medicine, because I have a great respect for the way German physicians think. They're very open-minded. And I ended up realizing that I could probably do more good by manufacturing protocols than I would as a person who had a clinic. It was just better suited to my personality type. I just like sitting down and doing lots and lots of research. And that's what I ended up doing. And so what I found was that there were a lot of really amazing protocols for helping people get better, but they weren't being promoted either because there was no money in them. Maybe they weren't patented, or the number of people that had that particular problem were considered very small. And they said, maybe it's a psychological disorder, right? We used to, the word hysterical comes from hyster, which is either in Latin or Greek, means womb. So when women some women have a difficult challenge as their hormones shift during their menstrual cycle. And rather than say, okay, let's try to understand what's going on for you hormonally, they would call women hysterical, which was just an insult because they were saying it's all in your head, right? But it wasn't. It was just the failure of the medical establishment to understand what's going on. Well, that happens in a lot of things, right? There's a lot of people who fall in the cracks, like for instance, Morgellons disease, which is this horrific quasi-parasitic infection where weird fibers come out of the skin. I can't tell you how many people who will call me up who have that, and I say, "Oh, have you heard of Morgellons?" And either they have or they haven't. And then I say, "Well, let me guess. Your doctor puts you on psych meds." And they're like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" Like, because they think you have delusional parasitosis, right? It's not delusional parasitosis. They have a documentable disease, but the doctor is not trained in that. And rather than have, not every doctor will, but some doctors will, rather than say, I believe you. I see you're suffering. I can see the samples you brought me. I don't know what it is. Sometimes they'll just say they're psychologically disturbed. So there's a lot of people who fall in the cracks who are told that it's all in their head. And these people, there's often no protocols for them that doctors are either informed about or that drug companies can profit from. So there's a lot of people who fall in the cracks in the medical model. And what I'd like to do is to find those protocols and make them available.
Yeah, I love that. And you've had, experience yourself, like you said, when you were 19. It's kind of like, your dream got shattered due to something out of your own control.
Well, you know what? It turns out I don't do too well if I don't get a good night's sleep. So it's just as well. I probably wouldn't. I probably wasn't the best person to be an emergency room physician at 3 a.m. In retrospect, and it was all the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah, 100%. So look, it's absolutely amazing that you've decided to do what you do, because as we'll go through the podcast, the knowledge that you have and the products that you've developed are absolutely amazing. They can help so many individuals. But before we get into that, in regards to optimal health and success, what does that look like for you now? Because I guess it would have looked a little bit different a few years ago.
Wow. It's a moving target, right? As you get older and hopefully wiser, your perspectives and your priorities change. So, trying to be the best version of yourself, trying to leverage what your own particular skill set is for the greatest amount of good you can do in the years you have. So that's what it is for me.
Yeah, 100%. And it's ever changing and ever evolving and moving. I love that. So let's talk about today's topic, being the correct way to remove toxins from your body. Because I mean, there's so much information out there. You put it into any search engine, you talk to any naturopath, you talk to a doctor, you talk to a nutritionist, you talk to a health coach, and everyone's got their own different views about how toxins should be removed out of the body. Some on the same level, some completely not on the same level. So to set it a little bit more straight, let's start off and talk about toxins, right? Because, this word toxins has come about. People hopefully are a little bit more aware of toxins in skincare, toxins that they breathe, toxins in medication, and so forth. But are you able to just give us an explanation of, what are toxins? What are they?
Sure. So there are classes of toxins, and a toxin, you could say, is something that gets into your body and interferes with your normal operation. And, we could talk about the classes of toxins, and I think that would be a good way to get into it. The first toxin you could talk about would be something water-soluble, right? And a water-soluble toxin will do the damage it's going to do, and then it comes out in the urine and it's over. So that's not that there aren't some very nasty water-soluble toxins that can really hurt people. That's not the kind of thing you have to quote unquote detox from, because it's going to leave on its own. What you would have to do is bandage the damage it's done afterwards. Okay. When we start getting into classic toxins, is when we start getting into things like fat-soluble toxins. Now, there are a lot of things in our environment that are toxic, but only mildly so, right? So if you get in a new car, there's toxins coming out of the upholstery. You buy a new carpet, there's toxins coming out of the carpet. When you eat food that's, processed food, there's pesticides and artificial flavors, artificial colors, artificial preservatives, artificial fats. And what happens is when these chemicals are are created, and they go through a process by which we determine what the lethal dose is and how toxic they are. And if they're only very, very mildly toxic, a tiny bit, then they can go into our food supply or go into general circulation without too many warnings. There's some toxins that are so bad that, you need a special license to buy them, or you need special facilities to handle them. But so let's say a certain pesticide comes out and they say, well, the amount of exposure that the average human is going to get over the course of a year by eating this amount of spinach, that toxin is negligible. Well, we could argue whether it's negligible or not, because a lot of studies are fraudulent now, because you can pay to get any result you want from the research facilities. It's basically without ethics in many cases. But let's take it at face value. Let's say that a particular thing is determined to be only mildly toxic. Well, that one, sure. But what they don't test is what happens when you have 8 million toxins you're exposed to. And although 8 million of them might only be a tiny bit, 8 million times a tiny bit not only is a lot, but then they also don't tell you what happens when they cross-react with each other, right? There are such things as drug reactions. Well, they're toxin reactions. So a person might have 5 or 6 toxins in them from any one particular thing, and each one of them was not enough to knock them out. But when you take a look at the cumulative effects of all the toxins we're exposed to through the air, the water, the food, our environment, and then you add to that the unknown interrelationships, we end up living in a very toxically challenged world. So that's why it's important to start thinking about detoxifying. In the same way, if you have a car, to change the oil every year or every 5,000 miles. Now, certainly you could take the oil out and send it to a lab and have an expensive analysis done, but you could also extrapolate from common sense and understanding of mechanics that if the oil has been in that car for a year, the oil will have been heated and denatured and there'll be metal shavings. You don't need a test to tell you that. So there are certainly tests you can do to determine your toxic level to a degree. But there's lots of toxins we don't have tests for. And if you're alive in the 21st century and you've lived, you're going to be exposed to these things. There's no way around it. So the first toxin that we really have to start thinking about is the fat-soluble toxins. And these store in the fat or lipids. So that would be the cell membranes. So every cell has a lipid membrane around it. And then inside the cell, all the organelles have little membranes, all 31 trillion cells and all the membranes inside those cells. And then you have the brain and the nerves. And fat-soluble toxins cause a lot of problems. Another class of toxins would be toxic metals. These mimic things that our body uses, and so it gets stuck in our body because our body thinks it's good. So lead looks like calcium, so it gets stuck in the bones, and cadmium looks like zinc, so it gets stuck in the prostate, and mercury looks like selenium, so you could see it in the thyroid, and aluminum looks like magnesium, you'll find up in the brain. They do leave on their own slowly, but we usually accumulate them faster than we get rid of them naturally. So we're going to have to learn how to help the body get rid of them. Another class of toxins we could call these functional toxins. So these would not be toxins in the classic sense because these are things that are sort of being generated internally rather than taken externally. But these would be things like gallstones and kidney stones and calcifications in the breast and prostate and brain, biofilms, and then the toxins that are created by infections. Aflatoxins from fungi and bacterial toxins from bacteria. These are all toxins. So for the water-soluble toxins, it's really easy. Just drink good, clean water. The challenge with that is a lot of people are B and C vitamin deficient. There are water-soluble vitamins you need, right? And so if a person is low on their water-soluble vitamins, and they drink water, then they're going to lose more water-soluble vitamins. So sometimes they're actually not going to want to drink water because it's going to dilute what little water-soluble vitamins they have. The other thing is a lot of the water people drink has the wrong electrical charge on it because it's positively charged in the process of cleaning all the solids out of it. And a lot of water that we drink is recycled wastewater, urine, from toilets, and they do their best to get these things out, but a lot of tap water is showing very high levels of drugs, antidepressants, birth control hormones, and things like that. So a lot of times people won't drink water because their body doesn't like the quality of water that's being presented to it, and in some way recognizes that more water is only going to dilute the low level of water-soluble vitamins you have. So if you're one of those people that doesn't like to drink water, get some good quality water, put a little bit of lemon into it for flavor, and take some B vitamins, and you may find yourself drinking water or craving it again. Now, it starts getting a little more complicated with the fat-soluble toxins. And I want you to think of soap and grease, right? Imagine you've got two dishes. On one is a little bit of dirt, and the other is some bacon grease, right? You run them both under water. The dish that had the dirt on it is clean because the dirt was water soluble, it's washed off, you're done. The one with the bacon grease on it, the bacon grease is still there because it's not water soluble. So water won't make it go away. So what do you need? You need a soap. Soap is a chemical that binds with grease. We first figured it out when someone was cooking a rack of lamb over an open fire pit in Paleolithic days, and the fat dripped onto the ash, which was lye, and created a primitive soap. Well, now we have better soaps, but the principle is that a soap is something that will combine with a fat and make it water soluble. So you add a little soap to the water, and now the bacon grease comes off because it's now being considered soluble, right? Now, the first time the most well-known fat-soluble detox is actually called a coffee enema. Have you ever heard of one? Have you tried one before?
I've heard of one, and I am in the midst of getting one, trying one. I haven't tried one yet.
Right. So the story goes, it's World War I in a German field hospital. And, when you do surgeries, you want to give someone an enema to rinse the bowels out so it's less complications. And this person, the nurse went to the doctor and said, "Doctor, we've run out of hot water for enemas." And the doctor looks around and says, "There, use the coffee in the coffee pot." She goes, "Okay." And they do. And the patient not only has less post-op pain, but heals faster. And the Germans, being very observant people, said, let's see if that was coincidence. And it turns out that coffee enemas help break down chemicals, some of them associated with pain, and help speed up healing. So hence became a coffee enema. Now, the challenge with it is, it's not very convenient. It means you have to, make a couple of cups of coffee and then get in a bathtub and lay on your side and pour all that coffee up inside your colon and sit there for half an hour, lay on your side for half an hour. And then there's a mess of cleaning up afterwards. So that's one challenge. A lot of people just don't want to do it. So doctors are rarely going to say, oh, take 2 coffee enemas and call me in the morning, because they know that their patients not only won't do it, but will probably not think too highly of them afterwards. So the other thing is, some people actually get worse when they do a coffee enema now. So let's talk about how can we make it more convenient, and how can we keep them from getting worse, and why would they be getting worse? What happens when someone takes coffee rectally is it stimulates something called phase 1 detoxification, which is where some genes called cytochrome that activate the cytochrome P450 enzymes add an oxygen to the fat soluble toxin. So you got this fat soluble toxin, it's sitting somewhere, and there's this enzyme called cytochrome P450, and it attaches an oxygen to it, which makes it more reactive. That's phase 1. And then right after that comes phase 2, when something is added to that reactive site, that oxygenated site. That would be a methyl group, a sulfur group, glucuronic acid, glutathione, an acyl group. There's lots of them, but those are the main 5. And that'd be called phase 2. So that's the soap process. In the body, there's a 3-step or a 2-step process for making soaps for fat-soluble toxins. Phase 1 is the first step. It adds an oxygen. We can stimulate that with coffee enemas. And phase 2 is the conjugate that then goes on it. Now, the challenge is, why would some people get sicker when they do this, or not get the results they're looking for? And that is, when you add an oxygen to a fat-soluble toxin, you temporarily render it more active. And you have to, because that's how we're adding those conjugates to it to get them out. But what happens if you don't have the conjugates? Well, now you have this more active toxin bouncing around the body. It's more active than before anything happened, but not active enough to get out. So it's a bad news. And so when you hear of someone who has multiple chemical sensitivities, which I had for a while, and it's another one of those things where people think you're crazy, right? Because they're right next to you in the elevator with a person who put on too much cologne, or they're right next to you in the car with the windows down as you drive behind a diesel truck, and they're fine and you're not, right? So what happens with people with multiple chemical sensitivities is their phase 1's working and their phase 2 isn't. So they have a toxin they're exposed to, like everyone else in the elevator or the car or wherever. And everybody's phase 1 turns on, but their phase 2 crashes. So now they can't completely get rid of the toxin. They've actually made it more toxic, and now they're really sick. And this is a result of a toxic exposure. When someone runs out of phase 2, because you'll run out of phase 2 before you run out of phase 1, right? When you run out of phase 2 and phase 1 is still going, you actually become more toxic than everyone around you in response to toxins. The toxins are far worse for you. So one of the things that happens is someone will do this kind of detox, right? They'll do a coffee enema or something that stimulates phase 1 detox. They read that this is a great phase 1 detox product, and they get sicker, right? Because now they're taking all those toxins that were in their body and they're making them more reactive, but they're not getting rid of them. And so they feel worse, and they call up the person who suggested it to them, and they say, oh, it's a healing crisis. It's a Herxheimer reaction. So yeah, for people that have multiple chemical sensitivities, that's huge. There are some people that just can't even go out into public because it's so bad. So the next thing I would talk about would be toxic metals. Now, some people will call them heavy metals. That's a very common phrase. And what a heavy metal is a metal that has a density greater than water. But I don't think that that's a useful way to refer to them, because some light metals, lighter than the density of water, like aluminum, are toxic. And some heavy metals, like zinc, are good for you. So I use the term toxic metals personally, for scientific accuracy. Now, what happens is all of our cells have these transporters on the cells. There's lots of different types. And the transporters will bring nutrition in and take toxins out. So think of the, sorry. Think of the transporters as like the toilets and the refrigerators of the cell. It's where the nutrition goes in, and it's where the toxins go out. The challenge is toxic metals, they look like things we need. They also look like nutritional metals. So the transporters will pull them in, but because they have a slightly different electrical charge or a slightly different radius, atomic radius, they'll get stuck inside the transporter and gum them up. It would be the equivalent of if someone goes and pours concrete into the toilet and puts chains and locks around the refrigerator. That would not be a house you'd want to live in very long if you can't eat and you can't get your wastes to go away. So this is what toxic metals do, among other things. They also are little free radical factories. So the way to get rid of toxic metals is to find something that has a greater affinity for the metal than your own tissue does. And my favorite is EDTA, which stands for ethylene diamine, which is protein, tetra for acetic acid, vinegar. So it's basically protein and 4 little vinegars. And EDTA has a wonderful affinity for all sorts of toxic metals. Now, it's usually given as an IV. That's because EDTA has a protein component. And if you eat a protein, you'll digest it and break it down if you have stomach acids and enzymes. So that's why IVs are typically given. If there's something, doctors don't want to give an IV. Nobody wants to give or receive something like that because it's invasive and time consuming. But it's done if the thing that you're trying to get into your body would be destroyed orally by digestion and couldn't be done orally. So EDTA is one of those things. There are people that will sell you EDTA capsules, but EDTA is not well absorbed orally, so I'm not quite sure why they do that. But we make an EDTA suppository. And so the benefit of a suppository, in this case, is there's no digestion there. So we bypass the issue of having it destroyed by the stomach acids and the enzymes in the small intestine. So in terms of an absorption, injection is the best, of course. Number 2 is inhalation, which is very fast and very effective. I personally inhale methyl B12. I did some this morning. And suppositories come in about 3rd place. So in terms of absorption, they're very highly absorbed. They're not as effective as an IV, but since you can do them at home and you can do them every day, you can end up actually getting more into your system than you could by taking an IV once a week. However, there's one caveat to that, and that's if you're dealing with mercury, which a lot of people are. EDTA, as well as the other classic chelators like DMPS or DMSA, will bind to mercury, but they can let go of the mercury if they bump into something like oxidized iron, Fe3. And there is oxidized iron in some people because, there's iron in the bloodstream, and if they end up having a little bit of damage to their blood cells, they can have iron get into their bloodstream and it can oxidize. So what'll happen is if someone has oxidized iron, and I think there's a form of chromium that'll do it too, and it bumps in. So let's say EDTA or one of these other chelators grabbed onto some mercury and it's getting ready to have it leave the body. And then it bumps into, an oxidized iron, it'll prefer the oxidized iron to the mercury. There's very little that EDTA wants more than mercury, but oxidized iron is one of them. And it'll drop off the mercury for the oxidized iron. And now you've got the mercury back in the system. However, it can be worse because it might have been someplace, say in the abdominal fat, causing a little bit of trouble, but not too much. And then the EDTA grabs it, moves it around, gets released, and now it goes into the brain and it causes more trouble. And this is the backfires you hear of people that do chelators for EDTA, for mercury. So this is another kind of detox trap. I don't really have the time to go into that today, but there are protocols that you can do to safely get rid of mercury. And if that's something that someone's interested, they can reach out to me on the website. So there's another kind of trap. We could call this, let's say someone is using something like zeolite or chlorella. Actually, let me back up a little bit. Let's talk about crystallizations. You wouldn't really classically call them a toxin, but they act like a kind of toxin, right? They're not necessarily damaging the tissue, but if you have a giant kidney stone that blocks the kidney or a bunch and it causes kidney damage, Or if you have a giant gallstone that blocks the bile duct and now the bile is going into the pancreas and burning the pancreas up and causing pancreatitis, functionally it's acting in a damaging way. So I think it's not unreasonable to call these things toxins from the perspective that we want to get rid of them. So in terms of crystallizations, we tend to turn to stone as we age. We calcify, all animals do. Now, for calcification, you can use EDTA. Our product, metacardium, the EDTA suppository, is calcium-free. So a calcium-free EDTA can bond to EDTA in the body. And calcium is actually a metal. You wouldn't think of it as a metal because it doesn't bend, it isn't shiny, but chemically it's a metal. So for the calcifications, you can use a magnesium-based EDTA, and that'll work wonders. Now, what about things like gallstones and kidney stones? If you happen to have an ultrasound unit and you look inside the average person, you'll be surprised how many people are walking around with little kidney stones or little gallstones or bile sludge. It's not that uncommon. Now, have you ever heard or tried of something called a liver gallbladder flush?
No, I haven't, but I have used herbs for some individuals.
Okay. So the liver gallbladder flush is where you, it's sort of in the same line of thinking of the coffee enema, right? It's not a very convenient thing to do, but it works. And basically it's you would drink half a cup of olive oil to stimulate the gallbladder with maybe some lemon juice. Maybe the week before you might be doing a bunch of malic acid to start softening the stones, or maybe some orthophosphoric acid. And you also mix some Epsom salt in to dilate the sphincter of Oddi, which is the little ring muscle at the bottom of the gallbladder that opens up and allows the bile to squirt out of the gallbladder into the contents of the small intestine. And so if you take the half cup olive oil and to stimulate the gallbladder and you open up the sphincter of Oddi, you might be able to squirt out a bunch of stones you couldn't ordinarily. But there's some challenges with this. First, it's not an enjoyable experience. It's not an enjoyable experience drinking it, and it's not an enjoyable experience passing them like that. Two, often people don't spend enough time softening the stones. So they, if it's too big to pass through the sphincter of Oddi, they'll just stay there. Three, a lot of people will say, well, I don't have a gallbladder. Well, okay, but the problem wasn't the gallbladder. Gallbladder is the place the problem fell into. So doing that kind of protocol won't do anything for the stones that are still being formed in the liver or the sludge in the liver. It's more of a mechanical phenomenon. It's not really working at the biochemical level of fixing what's causing the problem in the first place. Again, if someone has had a gallbladder removed, actually they should more than most be working on cleaning out that system. Even though there's no bag there to catch the stones, the problem is still there, right? It's not a problem as a gallstone, but there's still sludge in the liver likely being produced. Another issue with the liver gallbladder flush is it won't do anything for kidney stones. And then here's the strange thing that happens. Yes, you will definitely or can get stones out by doing this protocol. However, some of what comes out are just coagulated bits of olive oil caused by the flush itself. It's an artifact. You can create soft little stones just by taking the liver gallbladder flush. And what happens is people can think, they'll be told, keep doing liver gallbladder flushes until no more stones come out. But if every time you do it, you create fake little stones, then you'll never get the message to stop. I know people they'll just keep doing it day after day after day. And they say, well, I'm still getting stones out. I'm like, well, and I say, well, how many stones have you got out? And they'll show me like with their hands how much has come out. And I'm like, do you really think you had that many inside you? You're making them. You're creating them by artifact. And the challenge is the body wants to recycle bile. Bile is an expensive product to make from the body's perspective. And so although we're squirting it from creating in the liver, holding it in the gallbladder, squirting into the food to neutralize stomach acids and to kill parasites and to stimulate peristalsis, as it continues down, it gets reabsorbed and goes back into the liver. And if you do liver gallbladder flushes, you dump so much bile out that you can't absorb it all, and you end up drying the bile out. It's sort of like changing the oil of your car without putting more oil back in, right? Yes, you want to change the oil out of your car if your car has filthy oil, but you have to put fresh oil back in, right? So this is the third kind of trap. And that's where a detox causes the problem it's purported to resolve. I'll give you another example of this. Let's say someone wanted to get rid of some metals and they used some zeolite or chlorella. Now, those will work. However, there's a caveat. Zeolite is found in the earth, and there's lots of toxic metals in the earth. So a lot of zeolite has got toxic metals in it. And if someone just mines the zeolite, crushes it up, and puts it in a pill for you to take without first acid washing it and getting all the metals out of it, then you're actually taking in toxic zeolite. And then it hits your stomach acid, and now the metals come off the zeolite, and then your body's got full of metals and you don't feel very good. And then you get a urine sample and the doctor says, oh, wow, look at how many metals you're dumping. Stay with it. No, you're not dumping those metals. Those are metals you took in, right? And then you get stuck on one of these loops where you never get out of it because you keep taking, you keep feeling worse. You think you should just keep doing it, and you're actually making yourself more toxic because the product was toxic. The same thing can happen with chlorella if it's not grown properly. If you get some chlorella from a country that doesn't have good standards and they're growing it in an ocean next to the discharge of an industry, then you can have all sorts of toxins in the chlorella. So that's the third type, is when the detox you're doing is with something toxic and is causing the problem you think it's fixing. Okay, so let's go back to gallstones and kidney stones. With all those issues, we look to resolve them. We said, okay, can we do this in a way that is not distasteful and doesn't drain the body of bile and doesn't and works both on gallstones and kidney stones, and will do it a little slower by dissolving them rather than trying to pop them out in some kind of violent expulsion. So we made a suppository. In this case, we're not making it a suppository because it wouldn't survive stomach acid. All the ingredients in there you could eat, but it's by location, because right up inside the rectum is a huge blood supply for the liver. So you can get right into the liver as a suppository. So in this case, it's about location. And so that's a product we make. It's called Glytamins, and we do it to help support the body in dealing with what is phase 3 of the detox. And I'll explain how that kind of works. So let's say let's say you've inherited an old house, and you look inside the window and you see that there's half an inch of dust everywhere. All right, so you put on some work clothes and you get a broom and a dustpan and some garbage bags. Now, before you start sweeping, you really ought to open the doors and the windows, because if you don't, you're just going to blow dust all over the place. But if you can open the doors and the windows and you can sweep the dust right out the door, that's the best way to do it. So before you start doing a detox, whether it's metals with metacardium or fat-soluble toxins with Xenoplex, you want to open the doors and the windows of the house. And that, in this case, doors and the windows are the kidneys and the liver. That's the phase 3. That's phase 1 is you attach the oxygen to the toxin. Phase 2 is you conjugate the toxin. Phase 3 is it leaves the body through one of these pathways. And so Glytamins is what we do to support the body's phase 3 detox. Or you could say, if you were interested in something like a kidney flush or a liver gallbladder flush, you could consider Glytamins to support those pathways. And that's the fourth kind of detox, which is detox trap, which is starting detox when you haven't opened up the main pathways out of the body. The liver and the gallbladder and the kidneys are the main ones, but also for some people, they have to get the lymph moving. If their lymphatic system is completely clogged, they might not feel so good either. And then there's another kind of toxin that isn't often talked about would be like crystallizations in the body. So, the crystal, sorry, stop there for a second and start over. Sorry, head on out. Okay. Another kind of crystal that you can accumulate in the body is from diet. And these would be things that you take in that actually form crystals inside the tissue. And there's lots of these, but the one that's most common would be oxalates. Now, in the United States, in the 1920s, we had the Great Depression. And I suspect is probably worldwide, but I don't know our history in that sense internationally. But, some of the doctors were saying, well, look, we're seeing all these malnourished people and all these malnourished children. Is there some kind of food that people don't like to eat, but would be really good for them nutritionally? And they came up with spinach. And so in the United States, they created a PR campaign with a cartoon character called Popeye the Sailor Man. And there would be these cartoons where Popeye would be having a difficult day. Maybe a bully would be harassing him and his girlfriend. And then Popeye would take a can of spinach out of his pocket and eat the spinach and suddenly grow muscles and save the day. That was very well intended. What they didn't understand, because spinach is a highly nutritious plant, but what they didn't understand is there was a reason historically spinach wasn't eaten very much, and it's because it's loaded with oxalates, and the oxalates can form crystals inside the body. They're very sharp, so they can like little needles, so they can irritate the heck out of tissue. They also cause kidney stones. Now, there are cultures that have eaten spinach in a healthy way, and what they do is they combine it with dairy, and then the calcium in the dairy binds with the oxalic acid to form calcium oxalate, which is not absorbed in the gut. And that was the kind of ancient wisdom that they had. But, the doctors in the 1920s didn't understand that. And so they would just say, eat spinach, and then we have all these oxalate diseases. It's actually a lot more common now because there's a lot of health foods that are fads that are completely loaded with oxalates. Chia seeds, soy, almonds, beets, lots of different types of kale, loaded with oxalates, certain spices like cardamom. So that's another kind of detox trap. That would be eating foods you think are superfoods, but they're actually not just good. They're good and bad, and the bad outweighs the good. So let me get back to the oxalates. There's an inexpensive way to get rid of them, and that's just Epsom salt baths. The Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. And what happens is the sulfate displaces the oxalates, and the magnesium makes the oxalate water soluble. Magnesium oxalate is 230 some odd times more water soluble than the calcium oxalate that forms in the tissues. So if you can displace the calcium with magnesium, that magnesium oxalate becomes a water soluble toxin, and you pee it right out. And now, which takes us back to our first type of toxin, which is water soluble toxins. But oxalates are not the only kind of crystal that forms in the body. So if you consider that we have some 30 trillion cells in the body, you could liken them to little batteries. Now, like little batteries, like the batteries of a car or a cell phone, the batteries of your body can lose a charge over time. So when your cell phone or your car battery dies and it has to be replaced because it won't hold a charge, it's because there's crystallizations in the battery. In a lead acid battery, lead sulfate is created from the lead played in the sulfuric acid. So the process by which batteries age and fail, whether they're lithium or lead acid or what have you, is crystallizations. Now, if it's just your car battery or your cell phone battery, it's no big deal. You just buy another battery, but you can't do that for your 30 trillion cells. We need to find a way to fix them. Now, in industry, when you have very expensive batteries that you can't just replace or don't want to replace due to cost, say like the batteries on a nuclear submarine or the backup batteries for the power systems for a nuclear power plant or something, there are protocols that you can do to recover those batteries. They use high voltage spikes to cause the crystals to both dissolve and to shatter. We make a machine that does something similar called the electron charger. If you've ever heard of grounding, it's like that, but many orders of magnitude more powerful. So there are other ways to deal with crystallizations in the body. And if you do manage to use electricity for that in the right way, you'll often find that your urine will start turning cloudy the next day with all the debris that's coming out. But if you don't have access to one of our electron chargers and you're patient, you can do much the same thing with Epsom salt baths. And then this brings us to our last class of toxins, and that would be microorganisms. Viruses, fungus, bacteria, parasites, yeast, they create toxins. They not only generate damage, so there are two classes of infections you could have. You have the acute ones that, will eat tissue, like the ones that get in and eat skin, Staphylococcus and Streptococcus, and they'll actually eat the body their food source. And left unchecked, they can just, they're flesh-eating bacteria, they can just eat us up. But that's not the most common things that we're exposed to. Most of the infections we get are composters. And what the problem with those is not so much what they do to our body, more that the wastes that they continually create. So someone who has a chronic yeast infection or a fungal infection will be loaded with aflatoxins and they won't be able to think straight. It's not the yeast per se, but the toxins being generated by them. So there's a class of toxins that are a waste product of microorganisms. And those are the ones that I want to talk about now. So if you look at a compost pile, so most infections are composting infections, right? They're not these acute, eat you as food, more they just think you're compost and they're living on you because you look like compost to them. So if you look at a compost pile, you're going to see this layer of slime, and it's called a biofilm. And this biofilm protects the microorganisms, the viruses, fungi, bacteria, and parasites, which can all live symbiotically in the biofilm. It protects them from dehydration. It protects them from predation. It protects them from all sorts of things. And they can live together in symbiosis. Now, like I said, we're constantly exposed to these composters, but if we're healthy and we don't smell or taste or look like a compost pile to them, they'll pass right through us. They won't set up a biofilm colony in us. But if we have a lot of devitalized tissue in our bodies, then they're going to start living there because they're going to get the signal that we are compost, right? One of the ways that they get that signal is devitalized tissue has a lower electrical charge, and dead tissue has no electrical charge, right? It's the electrical charge that lets those transporters we talked about earlier function. So I think one of the reasons people are prone to compost biofilm type diseases, chronic diseases, is they have a low electrical charge. And as a result, the infections that these composting agents we're constantly exposed to get the signal that they're not vital, and then that they think they're a compost pile, and not enough electricity to feel like they're normal, and they set up shop, right? An interesting aside, when we first started using the electron charger, we noticed a lot of people are having worms come out of them into the toilet. I'm like, well, why is that happening? So I type in onto YouTube, worms and electricity, and I find these videos that show country folk will take a car battery and they'll take it to the riverside and put two probes on it, the positive and negative, and then put the probes in the earth and electrify the earth. And out come the worms, and then they grab them and put them on a hook and go fishing.
Wow.
So, yeah. So, this happens in nature. Worms are very big composters, but the composting community does not like electricity, right? It says, this is not where I'm supposed to be. This is, it wants soil and decaying matter. So I think we electrified somebody properly, and because we were trying to do it for crystals, but what ended up happening is people started passing worms out of them because the worms said, I'm in the wrong place. This is not a compost pile. Let me out of here. Anyway, so if we have devitalized low electron tissue in our body, then they're going to colonize us and set up shop, and they tend to go and build up on surfaces. So inside our arteries and the intestines and the sinuses and the teeth, the surfaces of the internal organs. And once a slime layer is complete, the white blood cells of the immune system can't do much because they can't penetrate more than a cell or two thickness deep in before they just get stuck like on a glue trap. So these chronic biofilm infections can persist for years, dumping their toxic wastes in because they have this whole system where they transport water and nutrition in and toxins out. So they're constantly dumping toxins into the tissue, but our immune system can't get in there to deal with them. Now, you could try to take some drugs to kill the viruses or fungi or bacteria or parasites, and it's usually a combination. But first off, it's going to take very high doses, then a lot higher a dose than it would take in a test tube. And that's because in the body, they're protected by the biofilm layer. And so you might have to do 10 or 100 times more of these toxic drugs to kill these things. But that won't always work because 1% of these infections are metabolically dormant. They're like sleeper cells. And that's their strategy. So if something comes along to wipe out the colony, one lunar cycle or two lunar cycles later, because these tend to go on lunar cycles, they'll wake up and they'll repopulate the whole thing. So someone, thinks they've knocked out a certain particular chronic disease and got the Herxhauer reaction and they gotten clear, 2 months later it's back because that 1% will repopulate it in a day. And it can be even worse because now they've got a drug-resistant version. So the way that I conceive of going after the biofilms is a two-pronged approach. One is I want to dissolve the structure of the biofilm so that my white blood cells can go in there and attack them. And the other is I want to interfere with their communication lines to confuse them, right? So plants have had to deal with biofilms for millions of years. They are the geniuses of the chemistry world, and they make all sorts of interesting chemicals. And what they have come to is the same conclusion, which is dissolve the biofilm and confuse it. And to do this, they create inside their plant bodies essential oils and bitters. Now, bitters interfere with the communication of the biofilm by interfering with something called quorum sensing, which basically is how the biofilm knows when to grow and when to stop growing. It wants to match its growth to the available resources, the ability for wastes to be washed away, and the size available to colonize, right? It doesn't want to just keep growing and then there's not enough food and not enough room and their wastes build up. So it has something called quorum sensing by which it says, okay, I can grow now. Oh no, I'm too big, back off a little bit. Okay, that's just right. And bitters interferes with that process. Bitters tells the biofilm, you've grown way too big, stop growing, shrink down a little bit. And the biofilm is like, oh, okay. The other thing plant gives us are the essential oils, and essential oils do two things. One is they directly dissolve the biofilm, and two, they're like the white blood cells, right? It will actually go not only and dissolve the biofilm, but kill the infections inside there. Now, fortunately for us, we can eat bitter and aromatic plants and ingest these essential oils and bitters and get the same benefit. The downside is bitters and essential oils are no longer in our diet. So what happened is over the last 1,000 years, we realized that if you take the sweetest carrot and made it to the sweetest carrot, you get an even sweeter carrot. And so they do that with all of these plants. And what used to be bitter and tart plants, carrots, grapes, apples, used to be pretty bitter. They're now very sweet. What we have done is in catering to our sense of taste, we have bred out all of the medicinal aspects of the plants because it's the bitters that are the medicinal parts. Now, the other thing is essential oils evaporate pretty quickly. Now, if you happen to have a garden outside your window and you're going to make dinner and you want to go and get some rosemary and some oregano and you chop it up and you put it in your food, you're going to eat the essential oils. But if you go to the store and get some spices that have been irradiated and fumigated and then sat out or sat in a bottle and exposed to air, there's no essential oils left in them. There's a huge world of difference between a freshly picked spice and something in a bottle. So because of that, because of our plant breeding programs, and because of the way food is harvested and delivered, we don't get bitters and essential oils anymore. So what I did is I said, all right, well, I want to get them. How do I do that? Because even if I go and I eat spices, I'm still not getting bitters so much because it's just, the seeds you get to grow aren't bitter so much anymore. So what I said is, let me see what I can figure out. And I took two of the most powerful bitters known to man, that's gentian and berberine. And then I went through about 300 essential oils, looking for ones that were edible, would not cause sensitization, meaning you wouldn't become allergic to it over time, basically had no side effects. You could eat that essential oil all the time. And I found like 3 or 4 essential oils that matched, the parameters I set for it. And I put them in a product called Zoibin, which is bitters and essential oils. And that is the equivalent as if you were eating 1,000 years ago. And, it's strange, I get calls from people with situations and conditions I would not have thought that would been helpful for. And they'll all be, oh yeah, it dealt with this or it dealt with that. So there's a lot of things that I would not have thought were biofilm related that are. So if you want that, certainly you can go and the cheap way to do it is, go pick some bitter dandelions and go have some fresh, spices. But if not, Zoibin's available to you. But it's important to remember that it's not enough just to kill the biofilm, break down the biofilm and kill the bugs. You have to get rid of that devitalized tissue. Because if you don't, it's just going to grow back again with your next bite of bread or your next piece of fruit, right? These composting agents are they're everywhere, and they're supposed to be, right? That's how nature works. Now, the best thing for this is a water fast, in my opinion, and that's not intermittent fasting. It takes, in order to get to some of that deep toxic tissue in the body, it's at least 7 days for that process to start for most people. So, I mean, if you want to do a short fast, like intermittent fasting for insulin resensitization and for stimulating certain genetic pathways and epigenetics, that's great. If you want to do it for a detox, it's going to have to take a little longer. So my suggestion, if you're going to do a fast for a detox, and I think that's a great idea, first, do a basic detox, something like our metacardium, Zenaplex, and glytamins, something to deal with metals and chemicals and opening up the detox pathways. Get rid of the low-hanging fruit first, right? That way, when you go and do the deep work of a fast, all the easy stuff is gone, and the body can then focus on the really difficult to get stuff that's deep into the tissues. And the way a fast, in my experience, happens is, the first 3 days, kind of grouchy and hungry, and then days 3, 4, 5, and 6, you'll be dreaming about all the food you're going to eat, and then somewhere around day 7, the stink starts. Right, your tongue gets coated, your breath smells terrible, your skin smells terrible. You can smell old drugs, pharmaceutical or recreational, that you've taken come out of you, or old chemicals you've been exposed to, maybe cigarette smoke. And then somewhere around day 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, the stink goes away, your breath becomes fresh again, your skin smells good. That is one detox cycle, and you're done. And my suggestion is, if you're going to come off a fast, do it with meat broth. I've tried coming off fasts with fruit, with dairy, with grains, and my stomach was never very happy with that. But what I do is I'll take like a brisket and I'll slow cook it for a day with some onions and carrots. And when I come off the fast, I'll just drink the broth. And then with another hour or two, as my stomach's starting to gurgle and wake up, I'll start working my way into the slow cooked vegetables and meat. And I find that's the easiest way to break it. So what do you do if you don't have the time or inclination to do a 14-day water fast, right? I mean, because you have to keep in mind, you might be okay for all 14 days, or you really might not be thinking you're clearest. You might want to sleep a lot. You probably shouldn't be driving a car. So if you want to try to break down devitalized tissue in the body and you can't do a fast, or you can't do a longer one, you can do proteolytic enzymes to break down diseased tissue. And my favorite one is serrapeptase. That's the enzymes that silkworms use to break down the chrysalis, the cocoon around them, and then come out as butterflies. And that particular enzyme does a great job at also breaking down diseased tissue in the body. Again, you can't take it orally, right? Because it's a protein, it's an enzyme. So we make it as a suppository. So those would be the kind of, that was what my detox protocols were for the last X number of years. Unfortunately, there's a new class of toxins that are out there. And if you want to talk about it, we could start talking about genetic toxins now.
Yeah, let's go for it. I mean, you've just blown my mind, and I'm pretty sure the audience is like, whoa, I'm definitely going to have to listen to this again. But all the stuff that you've mentioned just makes sense. And you've just gone into so much detail, and I really appreciate it. But yeah, let's move on to the next ones.
So it's estimated that a single strand of DNA in our cells is damaged 100,000 times a day, from things like endogenous oxidants, like superoxides, environmental chemicals, even sunburns. So of course, we have a genetic repair system, which is why we can take that kind of damage and still be healthy. But now our genes are exposed to a kind of toxin that is different both in quantity and quality to anything that's ever happened before. And I'm talking about RNA injections. So in June of 2021, all right, rephrase it this way. We live in a time where where genes can be altered. You can have your genetic code rewritten. And if you as an individual choose to do that for yourself, okay, that's your choice, free will, it's your body, do with it what you will, right? However, some people believe they have the right to alter another person's DNA without their consent or without their permission. There are research facilities around the world and patents that have been issued about putting genetic modifying technologies into the food we eat. So, for instance, you eat a little bit of lettuce, and there's something in there that alters your genetic code. We're not talking about genetically modified organisms where the lettuce is different. We're talking about you being the genetically modified organism, you getting your code changed by eating a salad. There's another one, I think it was Gates was trying to, or has done research by having mosquitoes bite people, and then the people that were bitten then had their genetic code rewritten. And then in June of 2021, the German government authorized the manufacture and use of self-spreading genetic protocols, meaning one person might choose to have their genetic code rewritten with an RNA technology, but then they go and they're in close proximity or intimate with or breathe on another person, and then they infect that other person with the gene-altering technology without their knowledge or consent, and with no way for them to stop it. So in today's day and age, if we want to maintain our original genetic integrity and pass those unaltered genes onto our children, we're going to have to up our scientific game a little bit, right? So like I said, there are 100,000 hits to a DNA strand every day, and most of them get repaired, not a big deal. So we have a genetic repair system. We have a ways of dealing with genetic damage. So my thought was, I could choose not to let someone put a needle in me to alter my genetics, but how would I stop it if it gets into the food supply, or if it gets into mosquitoes, or if it gets goes person to person? So I decided that I wanted to come up with something that would help deal with that. And so I looked at the ways in which the body deals with genetic toxins. And I found a series of firewalls, and I will share those with you and your audience now and show you ways in which you can boost your defenses to maintain your genetic integrity. The first genetic firewall would be removing damaged DNA, right? When the Human Genome did its project, finished its first reading of the human DNA in 2003, scientists were very surprised to find that 98% of the DNA was what they thought was junk. Now we know this is not accurate. They thought that anything that didn't code for protein was junk DNA. It's not true. There are other things that DNA does and other regulatory things, but we do have quite a bit of junk in our DNA, maybe 80%, right? And it's from viruses that use reverse transcriptase to get into our DNA, and we couldn't get them out. So we're about 80% junk DNA, meaning you could theoretically pull 80% of our DNA out and we'd be only the better for it. But there's another plant called Dionea muscipula, which is commonly known as Venus flytrap, and it's only 3% junk DNA. Somehow, the Venus flytrap has figured out how to remove junk DNA from itself. And indeed, people have been taking Venus flytrap extract for years to help them with virally associated conditions. So the first firewall would be to try to start clear out the junk in our DNA. If the body can recognize that it's junk, maybe we can pull it out. And taking Venus flytrap extract is one way to do that. The second firewall would be repairing damaged genes. So if your genes get rewritten and the body can learn to see that as damaged genes, it could snip it out and take it out. The real superstars in the world for genetic repair are the ants. They do this by creating a fat-soluble dialdehyde called iridoidal. And ant extracts have been used in Chinese medicine for millennia. More recently, the famous German doctor Hans Nieper identified the iridoidal as the extract that gave ants their remarkable healing capacity. Now, unfortunately, I'm not aware of any facilities that mass produce iridoidal. I wish they would, because I'd buy it by the kilo. But the next best thing is to get mountain ant extract, and then you could take the iridoidal in that way. And that is a way, the second firewall that you might use to upregulate your ability to to repair bad DNA. The third genetic firewall would be something called gene silencing. Now, imagine your DNA is like a giant library, and every book in it contains the instructions on how to make something, typically proteins. Now, if the book just sits on a shelf, let's say the book's a bad book, right? It's a book that tells you how to make something terrible. As long as it just sits on the shelf, not a problem. But if someone requests the book and gives it to the librarian and then asks the librarian to take that book out, and now they're reading it and following through the instructions of the book, now we've got a problem, right? If it's a bad gene, right? Making something that doesn't belong in the body. So imagine some villain sneaks some bad books on how to make bombs, books on how to create disease into the library, right? Let's say some multi-billionaire decides to do this, right? They're basically putting instructions into your library that your librarian is going to then take out and read on how to make terrible things. Let's say a villain makes a book on how to make bombs, right? Now, you don't want these books being read, so you tell the librarian, hey, you see those books right over there that just got put in? Don't make them. Just leave them on the shelves. This is a process called gene silencing. We have the ability to not activate certain genes. It actually happens in two different places. One is at the transcriptional level where DNA unwinds and the RNA is created. And the other is at the translational level where RNA goes into the ribosomes in the cytoplasm or endoplasmic reticulum to make protein. So we actually have not only can the librarian say, no, we're not going to take that book out, but then there's also another worker who can also say, oh, do you want to take this book out? The librarian must have missed it. No, we're not reading this book. Go stick it back on the shelf, right? So gene silencing is a great way to deal with bad genetic influences. It just says, if you can't repair it and you can't cut it out, then just silence it. The major player in gene silencing is methylation, but about 50% of us are under-methylators and about 10% are over-methylators. And this has to do with genetic flaws in the MTHFR SNPs, the singular nucleotide polymorphisms in our genes. So because some of us are over-methylators, you don't just want to raise methylation across the board. What you want to do is you want to balance methylation, right? If it's low, bring it up. If it's high, bring it down. So you have optimal methylation, you have optimal gene silencing. What you're looking for is a methylation adaptogen. And fortunately, there is one. It's called curcumin. However, you don't want to waste your methyl groups detoxifying things like heavy metals or chemicals. And glyphosates and parabens will do that. So one of the things you might want to do is do one of the detoxes, we were talking about, if you're interested in the metacardium, the Xenoplex, and the glytamins to support the body in dealing with metals and chemicals, so that the glyphosates, the parabens are out, so that when your methyl donors are properly functioning, they can be used for gene silencing rather than wasting them on something like that you can do, like the artificial colors and flavors you had with, the donut that day that you could have taken out in another way. So gene silencing is another major firewall. A fourth firewall would be self-destruct signals. So if a bad gene gets inserted into the DNA and it starts pumping out damaging proteins, so the gene silencing, if that didn't work, if the repairing didn't work, if snipping it out didn't work, if there's nothing you could do to repair it or to get rid of it, then the next step is for the cell to commit suicide, to self-destruct. And that does it with something called a p53 gene. It's called apoptosis. So the cell literally self-digests. And the problem is the herpes family of viruses, that's herpes, chickenpox, Epstein-Barr, mono, cytomegalovirus, cold sores, they can damage the p53 gene that's responsible for apoptosis. So we can end up losing the ability for that. So my favorite thing for that is something called a latch tannin, which is a natural plant compound found in raspberries and some other things that stimulates the apoptotic cycle. So you want to support that so that if a cell, no matter what, if a cell is still making bad proteins, you can have the cell just take one for the team and self-destruct. Another thing you want to do is you want to balance something called your T regulatory cells, and you can use astragalus with that. What happens is one of the things you'll find in certain injections are things called adjuvants that are designed to hyperstimulate your immune system, with the idea behind being that your immune system is educated towards going after whatever was just injected into you to make you resistant to it. But the problem is it could create autoimmune issues as well. So if genes get damaged and start making rogue proteins that are similar to proteins we find in our own bodies, then you can end up with a systemic autoimmune disorder. Now, the body can clear out rogue proteins, but it can only take out so many of them. So it's really important that our immune systems stay calm during this time. It is the T regulatory cells that suppress the inflammatory cytokines that are responsible for doing this. And curcumin, the ingredient we talked about for gene silencing, also, along with the astragalus, they can both support T regulatory cells. So that's a way to keep the immune system from overreacting to those proteins that still manage to express themselves no matter what we've done. So you have all the ingredients. We make a product called Regenemin that has all those for you if you don't want to have to go and buy them separately and mix them up. But those are ways in which you can support the body in dealing with rogue genetic manipulation. And that's also something that's specifically useful for women during the luteal phase of their cycle, which is, when PMS would happen if a woman is susceptible to that, because that's when her T regulatory cells are the lowest. So, dealing with genetic toxins, that's something that it's important to understand how to do, not just for ourselves or our kids. If you like, I can also share with you 2 other protocols for people who may choose to take them by injection. And if they find that there are people who may, in our country, who are being told if they don't get injected, may not have access to seeing their children. They'll lose their retirement benefits. The military is being told that they may be given a dishonorable discharge, which means they can't vote, they can't own a gun, they lose everything. So there's a lot of people that are being forced in our country, far more in yours, to get vaccinated. So if you like, I will tell you the protocols that I'm working with to deal with people that, against their wishes, are finding themselves in a position where they're being forced one way or another to get vaccinated, and what you can do about that.
Yeah. Wow, I love what you shared about the genetic protocols. That's absolutely amazing, and it just makes sense. And yeah, if you have time, I would absolutely love to hear what else you've got to share. I'm all ears, and I'm pretty sure the audience is also.
All right, hang on a second. I got to go get something to show you, and then we'll start that.
No worries.
Okay, so in the old Western movies, all right, let me rephrase this. I saw a video where someone in Russia had done what's called plum blossom technique, which is where you do a little scarification on the arm, and then you put a vacuum cup over it and you suck blood out. And they said, oh, well, if you do this, it'll help pull the toxins out from the vaccine. And that's not accurate. The vaccine isn't in the blood at that point. It's in the soft tissue, the fatty tissue, and then the lymphatics, and then the blood. And by the time it's in the blood, it's not going to be in the shoulder. It's going to be systemic. So doing that is only going to cause trauma to the shoulder and make it actually more inflammatory and more systemic. So that's the wrong way to do it. In old Western movies, they used to show the hero taking a Bowie knife and making a cross through the puncture marks of the snake bite to suck the venom out. No, that's just bad Hollywood. What you do with a snake bite is you wrap with like an ace bandage, and then immobilize it, because it's lymphatic movement, it's a muscle movement that's causing the lymphatics to move, which is going to spread it through the body quicker. And that buys you the time to get to the hospital, where hopefully you can get the antivenom. Okay. So I like to think of vaccinations, injections, as like a snake bite. And what do you do for that? So the first step is you wrap the arm. You try to get the vaccine as low in the deltoid as possible, because you're going to want to wrap it with an ace bandage or whatever you have handy. You're not making a tourniquet here. You're not trying to stop blood flow. You're trying to stop lymphatic flow. So just sort of like a compression bandage. And then my suggestion is get the strongest neodymium magnet you can find. We make these special curved ones that fit directly over the shoulder. But if you can't get ours, hang on, I got to find a place to put this so it won't damage electronics. Okay. If you can't get ours, any powerful neodymium magnet will work. And the reason is because there are paramagnetic elements in the vaccines. There is graphene oxide and superparamagnetic iron nanoparticles. And so let me explain what paramagnetism is. Normal magnetism is north and south attracting and north repelling of two magnets. Okay? Diamagnetism, which most things are diamagnetic, is they are repelled from a magnetic field, right? And paramagnetic is something that's attracted to a magnetic field. So graphene oxide and spions, which are, we believe have been shown to be in vaccines, are paramagnetic. So if you can put a powerful magnet over the shoulder, maybe you can keep it in the shoulder longer, because otherwise it's going to be in the liver in 5 minutes. We could talk about why graphene oxide and spions are in. Ostensibly, the spions are there for magnetofection, which is the process by which things enter the cell more quickly and make the vaccine more effective. And the graphene oxide would be there ostensibly to protect the fragile RNA. However, graphene oxide is nearly a room temperature superconductor, which makes it a fantastic antenna. And spion, and when reduced, goes into the brain in the hippocampus and the thalamus. And spions would be attracted to the most magnetic part of the body, which would be the pineal. So if you wanted, okay, so there are studies that they're doing now with animals where they inject these things into animals, and then they are able to apply a electromagnetic field to the animal and control or alter the animal's behavior, because these elements go into the nervous system, go into the brain, and then they go to very particular places. And then if you could stimulate, say, the pain center or the pleasure center or the anxiety and fear center, or a center that suppresses executive thought, you could manipulate people electromagnetically by placing things that are self-assembling antenna with the use of PEG hydrogels, courtesy of DARPA. And I know a lot of people will say, well, that's just crazy sci-fi. But we live in a crazy world right now. So, take it for what it is. The patents exist. The studies have been done on controlling animal behavior by having these elements go to their brains and affecting them with radio waves. So part of the magnet concept is, if we're going to have self-assembling antenna that will assemble in the brain from a magnetic field, let's force assemble it in the shoulder. Let's sacrifice the shoulder and save the brain. And if I can have a strong magnet, force that hydrogel to assemble here, great, because that's where I want it. There are some people, very well-meaning, that will tell you to take things like vitamin C and N-acetylcysteine to reduce graphene oxide. Terrible idea. That the people who are doing that have confused the word reducing. Reducing has two meanings. One is make it go away, and the other is add an electron. And what they're doing is they're reducing. When you take those things, you're not making these things go away, you're adding electrons. So they are reducing graphene oxide, but they're not making it go away, they're creating reduced graphene oxide. And reduced graphene oxide is the one that has the affinity, at least in animal models, for the hippocampus and the thalamus. And if you start damaging the hippocampus and the thalamus, you're damaging sense of memory, muscle control, psychiatric disorders, and then also a sense of spatial awareness on where you are. So if you really wanted to create a zombie, if you wanted to create somebody that spasmodically moved around, was crazy, and didn't know where they were, those are the two parts of the brain you'd affect. So, all right. So anyway, I believe you can get rid of graphene oxide, but not by quote unquote reducing it, by doing the opposite, by oxidizing it. So this is a vial of graphene oxide, right? And this is a vial of graphene oxide that has been exposed to an oxidant, right? Okay, so the oxidant I chose was based on scientific literature. There was a study that said that there was some enzymes. Okay, hang on a second. I'll see if I can give you the exact names of them.
Mind blowing. And anyone
yeah.
who's listening to the audio version just showed us that the graphene oxide was darker, and the one that was oxidized was light color. If you're not watching it on video.
Okay, right. So there's a study, and you can look it up, called Enzymatic Degradation of Graphene Quantum Dots by Human Peroxidases. And it says that the enzymes myeloperoxidase and eosinophil peroxidase, which are produced respectively by neutrophils and eosinophils, which are white blood cells, degrade graphene oxide. And they do it by creating hypochlorous acid, HClO. So how do we do that? We could try to upregulate the enzymes, but let's just bypass that and go right to the hypochlorous acid, which is something Jim Humble, if you've ever heard of him, was suggesting as a great protocol for certain things. You can look up MMS2, and Jim Humble was suggesting something on the order of about 1 milligram per kilogram body weight, calcium hypochlorite in a capsule with water every hour, about 8 hours a day. And what happens is the calcium hypochlorite, and make sure that's the one, when it hits the stomach acid and water, it goes and breaks up and turns into hypochlorous acid and hypochlorite in equilibrium. And that is what I put in those vials. I put a little bit of calcium hypochlorite and in one of them, and you can see it broke it down. It's not for long-term use. It'll cause protein cross-linking. But now someone is going to come and say, well, I can't find human pharmaceutical grade calcium hypochlorite. I only see, pool grade, pool shock. I only see it as a bleach agent. And that's true. Yeah, it's too bad. I wish we could find food grade calcium hypochlorite. But what I will say is if you can find calcium hypochlorite that is used for water purification, for drinking water purification, that's going to have to meet certain standards. And so if you can put it in something to purify drinking water, it's probably clean enough to put in your body. But, that's got to be a decision you have to make. In any case, that is something that I've just shown you will break down graphene oxide. All right. So you wrap the arm with an ace bandage. You put on a magnet. You wrap it again. You put it in a sling so you don't move the arm, and you breathe as slowly as possible because the diaphragmatic breath will move the lymph. And then you go to your antivenin, right? In this case, the antivenin is calcium hypochlorite. That's what I'm thinking. If somebody comes up with something different, great, please let me know. And then there are homeopathics. You can get homeopathic spike protein, homeopathic graphene oxide. Finally, one last thing, and this is what I've just done the research on most recently, is what do we do for someone now who's already got their genes altered and whose body is generating lots of spike proteins? Now, in the human body, genes have, parts of your DNA have a section that says start here and stop here, like little parentheses, right? But what happens if somebody puts something into our genetic code and didn't put the start and stop? They just put the start, right? It's sort of like you don't let monkeys rewrite Shakespeare. They're just not, you don't let a 3-year-old rewrite Shakespeare, right? Our genetic code is Shakespeare, right? And we are messing with it in ways that we don't understand and can have very serious long-term sequelae, consequences. So, I'm thinking, all right, let's say somebody has got the bad genetic information and their body is generating spike proteins. Okay. Well, a lot of it goes into the nucleus, and boy, that's going to be tricky. I'm not quite sure how we go in there. Some of it's going to get expressed onto the outside of the cell that's making it. And then some of it is going to butt off into the bloodstream. Now, if you look at the spike protein, it has the active parts on this are the arginine and lysine residues. So arginine and lysine are amino acids, and they're stuck in the spike protein, and they got their little tail sticking out, and that's where the action happens. So I thought if we can stick something on the lysine, which is the main one, but also arginine, but if we could stick something on the lysine, kind of like put a cap on it, put some glue on it, cover it up, then maybe it won't be functioning. Maybe the immune system can't see it. And I found 4 things in the literature that will bind to the lysine residues that are non-toxic. We have alpha lipoic acid, but you have to be careful because if you're toxic on mercury and you take alpha lipoic acid, it can move the mercury around. Biotin, the sugar arabinose, and beta-hydroxybutyrate, which is the ketone. The trick with beta-hydroxybutyrate is there's a study that shows it will shear off the spike protein that's on the cell wall. But then where does that sheared off part goes? It goes into the bloodstream, and maybe it's going to cause clotting. So if you're going to do beta-hydroxybutyrate, don't just do that, because then you can end up with clotting disorders. Do the beta-hydroxybutyrate with the biotin, with the arabinose, and with the alpha lipoic acid. I don't know yet if any of those get into the nucleus. So I'm not, if they don't, we're going to have to find some way to deal with that. Or maybe the answer is simply apoptosis and just have that cell, hit the self-destruct button. But even so, we're going to have to deal with all the spike proteins flowing all over the place. And I think that those things that bond to lysine and arginine residues currently is my way of thinking.
Wow, there was so much valuable information there. And like you said, here in Australia, a lot of people are at that stage where they've already been injected. They've already put something in themselves that, under duress, they had to keep their job, to see their family and things like that. But it's so good that we have individuals like yourself that are looking into this and looking at the studies. And, you're saying some things which were, some people were like, what? But it's there. The patents are there. The research is there. And the question is where is it going to go? That's the scary thing, I think. But I think, look, you've shared so much valuable information today. I am so thankful for you for researching all of this, for looking into this, for making sense of it all for us. With all of your knowledge and experience. I do really appreciate your time. So we've learned so much about toxins. We've learned so much about what different types of toxins there are, what you can do. And I'm also going to put down the website of a Remedylink in the show notes that individuals are able to purchase any of the products that you've mentioned through today's podcast, and are able to get even some videos there that you've got of protocols and so forth. So I really do appreciate your time, and are able to purchase the magnets that you've spoken about and so forth. Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we close off to these individuals? I mean, look, you've given them some hope, you've given them some information, and it's for them to make a decision of where they want to go from this and what they want to do.
What I would say is a single injection is not a death sentence, but understand that exponentially with each one you take, it gets worse. There are a lot of people behind the scenes, Mihaela, that are working on trying to figure out ways to fix this problem. So, there is hope. And, I have heard doctors say, oh, once someone's been vaccinated once, that's it, they're done for. I don't believe that. And I don't think it's true. And I don't think it's helpful to say that. I think that the body has a remarkable capacity for repairing and regenerating. And there's a lot of people out there who are working at figuring out, doing research, trying to understand ways we can deal with this. People like yourself are spreading information. So, if do the best you can to maintain the integrity of your genes, and, try to keep that stuff from getting inside of you. If it's already happened, do your best to neutralize some of it, pray for help, pray for guidance. And, we will get through this as a species. There's going to be some challenging years ahead, but, I'm looking forward to what's on the other side of this. I'm looking forward to a society that has recognized the control freaks, the psychopaths that are in positions of power, for the unhealthy psyches that they have, and get to the point where we start learning how to choose leaders that are better humans, that are kinder people, that where science is actually looking not to make a dollar, but to make a difference. There's a better, it's going to be a difficult time for a few years, but the world that will be on the other side of this will be a more educated, more compassionate, healthier world for all of us. So hang in.
100%, 100%. You've said that so well, so well. Thank you so much. And what better way than to close it off on your final words? I do appreciate it. Thank you so much, Spencer. I do appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll get you back on a Natural podcast to talk about a few other things, including being off the grid.
Sounds great, Mihaela. It was nice
Awesome.
talking with you.
Thank you for joining us at the Natural Podcast. And remember, the missing link between failure and success is your health. Content and information provided here is opinion of Mihaela Raguse and is for information purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. It is not intended to provide medical advice or take the place of medical advice or any current treatment you're undertaking. Consult your own medical professionals for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the Natural Health Podcast. It is advised that you consult your doctor or healthcare professional in relation to any health concerns you may be having. Mihaela Raguse does not take responsibility for any health consequences which occur from a person listening, viewing, or reading this content. Under no circumstances shall the Natural Podcast, Mihaela Raguse, any guests or contributors to the Natural Podcast, or any employees, associates, or affiliates of Mihaela Raguse be responsible for damages arising from the information provided on the Natural Podcast. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical conditions in either yourself or others. Please note, if you're taking prescription, do not stop your medication or start a new protocol, including but not limited to supplements, diet, lifestyle changes without consulting a doctor or healthcare professional. If you or any person has a medical concern, you should consult with your healthcare provider or seek other professional medical advice. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something that you have read or heard on the Natural Podcast or in any linked materials. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. Neither Mihaela Raguse nor the publisher of this content takes responsibility for the possible health consequences of any person or persons reading or listening or following the information in educational content.